The resilience of joy, the importance of cultivating joy for Black family well-being. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with the way that you think? Those irrational thoughts that must be the cause of your mental anguish. What's wrong with the way that you parent? Those harsh practices that traumatize your children and set them up for failure. What's wrong with those systems you abide in that dehumanize you and cause adversities? What's wrong with you? Black people, Black parents, Black families. If only we could know what was wrong with you, then we could fix your high-risk, vulnerable lives. These are the messages either implicitly or explicitly stated in our conventional ways of conducting psychological research and engaging in clinical practice. Linda James Meyers proposed in her optimal conceptual theory, people become psychologically ill because they fail to remember or otherwise become aware of what is right with them. She argues that when we fail to recognize that we are a spiritual being having a human experience, then we don't remember that we are intrinsically worthy and valuable. And then when we fail to recognize that we as a spiritual being are one with all of life, then we suffer disconnection and isolation. And when we fail to realize the harmony, purpose, and order of the universe, then we drown in the anxiety of uncertainty and we grasp for control of the uncontrollable. James Meyers' theory couches all of these Afrocentric assumptions within the social context of Black people living in a country that constantly reminds us of our lack of worth, our otherness, and our lack of agency. This is a culture that has enslaved and dehumanized our ancestors and in many ways continues to remind us of our lack of humanity and value today. This is a culture that permits authority figures to commit heinous, violent acts against us and not be held accountable by the laws of the land. To live in such a toxic environment is indeed a recipe for dis-ease. Dr. Meyers is quoted as writing, "Power is the ability to define reality." And today, I aim to redefine our reality about Black families by flipping the conventional way of thinking on its head. I will attempt to lead us back to a more autochthonous way of thinking, that is to say, a way of understanding human well-being that predates colonization. And in doing so, consider what is right with Black people and our families. And I argue that what is so completely right with Black people is our joy. Kleaver Cruz has said that Black joy is healing, resistance, and regeneration. And in African American culture, Black joy has taken the form of joy-based practices, which I define as the individual and collective expression of pleasure and positive emotion in one's life. These types of practices include celebratory rituals such as ancestor celebrations, drum circles, communal singing and chanting, dance, and other mindful movement activities, as well as storytelling of one's ancestors' triumphs. These types of joy-based practices, specifically storytelling, drumming, and song, have been supported in the empirical literature by Akbar, Jones, Nobles, and of course, James Meyers herself. Many practices were passed down from African ancestors, like the ring shout, which was a spiritually expressive dance ritual that enslaved Africans engaged in. This ritual facilitated community and joy through creative expression. More contemporary expressions of the ring shout can be seen in the dynamic call and response nature of the praise and worship portion of Black church services. Cultivating and living in joy has positive psychological benefits. For instance, in her autoethnography, Black Women's Joy and Why It Matters, Tinka Harvard points out that even though Black people live in oppressive, anti-Black societies, choosing to live with joy is indeed a radical act. She goes on to highlight that living in joy has the power to transform pain into togetherness. It can help heal painful racialized encounters. and it reduces the mental and emotional space one has available for suffering and self-negation. Joy for Black people is found and cultivated in and through community and is grounded in our spirituality. But what can cultivating joy in the Black family look like? Well, I'll share with you a story of my own family. So let's talk about the kitchen hair salon. You know, when it's time for the ladies in the family to get their hair fixed, and what do? We gather in the kitchen and exchange hairstyling services with one another. My daughter, who is now 17, has been initiated into this process for many years. This kitchen space is not just a space of hairdoing, it is a space of community, of cultivating pride and joy in our identities as Black women. This communal hair-doing ritual is indeed a joy-based practice. Dr. Marva Lewis highlights this in her research on attachment and bonding for Black mothers and daughters during hair combing. And this is a part of joy and connection that is implicit in being a mom to this beautiful Black girl who has kinky hair. And at the end of our kitchen time, at least one of us comes out of it with a brand new do, looking beautiful in all of her Black girl magic. This is what joy in Black families can look like in these informal moments of gathering and sharing. Now imagine with me, if you will, what a joy-based, what's right-based approach might look like in clinical practice. It would mean actively assessing a client's level of joy with psychometrically sound instruments so that the client can make the connection between their joy and their health and well-being. It might mean connecting a client's self-knowledge of individual resilience to their collective and ancestral knowledge of triumph. And of course, it might look like prescribing joy-based practices as a treatment modality. And what about for the academics among us? It might look like developing psychological instruments that measure joy as a construct. This is a task I've chosen to take on for my next research project. It might also look like conducting qualitative research that actively explored joy as a mechanism for healing and thriving for Black families. And of course, challenging the existing research that suggests a lack of joy or a lack of thriving in Black families. This would lead to our field presenting research findings on Black families in academic and public facing spaces that frame our people from a strength-based perspective. This, I get, is a radical and big ask, one that requires us to go beyond doing psychology's business as usual. But take heart, there can be joy even in the process of moving towards joy. And because this is a talk on joy in Black families, I would like to end by imparting some encouragement to the leaders of our Black families, my beloved Black parents. Beloved Black parents, know that you stand on the shoulders of resistance, of ancestors who stood in persistence. Know that you are the product of strong genes, of people oppressed by all means. Know that you shine as answered prayers of those that came before you, of wise ones who dared to dream of what you can now do. Know that you come from their work, their toil, and their pain, of foundations beneath all you have gained. Know that you come from storytellers, drummers, and dancers, of acknowledgement of their free souls even without the answers. Know that you're descendant of knowers and seers who listened inside, of survivors and thrivers through the atrocities outside. Know that you come from beings who knew their oneness with all, of strong roots firmly planted during the fall. Know that you are divine, a manifestation of their great joy, of hope, of grace, an immaculate expression of faith. Ashe, and thank you.